Today I was looking at the top 10 existential questions that have troubled humanity for a long time and are still troubling them. And I thought I'll give them an attempt at answering them through the lens of non duality, at least, at least the best that I can. So, the question for today is that why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there something rather than nothing? And there are many variations of this. Why does anything exist when nothing could have been, right? Why does something exist instead of nothing? And really the short answer is something only exists because there is a seer to see it, because you are looking. Because you're looking. There is the seer, there is the experiencer trying to experience something. That is why there is something. And an easy way to understand it is by just knowing how illusory your experiences, the objects that you see in the outer world. When you see a tree, or let's say a small cube, right? The same cube appears a bit roundish to a fish. It appears slightly spherical. You know how we have a fish eye lens in cameras. It's modeled after a fish's eye and the way in which the fishes see things, right? Objects appear spherical, and that is because they have a field of view that is more advantageous to them in the water, right? They need to have a 360 view, or as close to 360 as possible, as wide field of view as possible. So to cram in that amount of field of view into a smaller space, the field appears a bit roundish to them. So the same cube that you're seeing appears as a spherical, somewhat spherical, roundish cube to a fish. And you see how the appearance is very specific to the fish. Now you might ask, which one is real? The fish may argue that, or you might argue that the fish's eyes are primitive, ours are more advanced. So we see the cube for what it is. It's a cube with straight lines. Whereas the fish may argue, hey, you were a creature of water billions of years ago. You just crawled out of water, and now you're a land creature and you see through air, and your eyes have deteriorated in the air to see things differently. My eyes never had to evolve. They were perfect. So I see a cube for what it is, which is that the cube is slightly spherical. Which one is real? Which one is real? And here we're just talking about the sense of vision. At least the sense of vision is common. The appearance may appear different, but we're seeing through the same senses. Some creatures, they don't have eyes at all. You might have heard of the phrase as blind as a bat, right? And bats, they can maneuver themselves very, very expertly, even within the darkest of caves, where there isn't even a beam of light shining through. Pitch dark caves. And how do they do that? They do that through a sense of echolocation, which we don't have. They let out a screech, and the vibrations, they hit the surfaces and return to their ears. Their ears are big ears, like the same size as their faces. And they can detect those sound waves, slight variations in those sound waves, and we can't even tell what they're experiencing or how they're experiencing the same world. Like if we were to enter that cave, first of all, we wouldn't see anything because it would be fully dark. But if we were to shine light in that cave, we would experience it in form of colors and shapes. But the bat wouldn't experience anything like that. It probably sees a mesh of frequencies, of sound waves, and it would construct its own experience in its mind. We can't even imagine what it would be experiencing the world as. So this appearance is very specific. When we call something as something, that is very specific to us or our species or a group of species which have eyes. Other creatures, other form of creatures, creatures that we don't know of, creatures that we might not even call creatures, are experiencing the world in very different ways. Think trees, for example. We don't even know if they experience and how they experience. We've seen some response to stimuli in trees, but in plants, but we don't even know if they experience at all. So then, how does it relate to the question of why does something exist instead of nothing? It's because different forms of minds are trying to experience things. And there's something, the existence is just like a canvas in front of you, right? Existence doesn't tell you that it's a tree. This something is a tree. This something is a mountain. This something is a dog. These are concepts that we've held in our minds. We outline an a specific appearance within that scenery, and we name it and we remember it as a concept in our heads. Like a tree is not really a tree, it's a name we've given to the tree, to that appearance. See how even I am stumbling here. I'm calling that, of course you'll call a tree, but no, it is us calling it a tree. So something that you experience are just concepts in your head. Think of that bat and how it's experiencing the world around it in the form of just a mesh of frequencies, and how it probably sees an undivided form of existence that we have divided into trees and dogs and creatures that are conscious and creatures that are not conscious, man-made objects and natural objects. Existence doesn't speak of anything at all. So yeah, there's this something is just an appearance to us. Things are appearances, and the appearances have been separated by us and labeled by us, which is why we call them as that specific object. Something don't exist at all. An undivided existence exists. That is what is non-duality. Why does something exist at all instead of nothing? Now, the first part of the question is somewhat answered, right? Why does something exist? Because some things are really just appearances outlined by you and labeled. I'm repeating myself, but no amount of how much of repetition I do, it's still less for us to truly get it. Some things are just appearances labeled by us as separate objects. That's the first part of the question. Some things don't exist, an undivided existence exists. Existence exists. I know that sounds stupid, but yeah, language fails here probably. And the second part is, why does something exist instead of nothing? Why is there something? Not even some things, not even specific some things, but why not nothing? And that is because there is the seer. That is because we are conscious of things. We are constantly trying to be conscious. Every time you are awake, you're trying to experience something. That is why something appears. That is the potency of consciousness. Now, what do I mean by the potency of consciousness? Potency of consciousness just means that when consciousness flows out through our senses, our eyes, the eyes are instruments that show us different colors, right? They show us different colors, and those colors are seen by us as distinct, and those distinctions are then labeled by our mind as separations, as outlines, like we can separate one thing from another. But now you might ask, why is there any appearance at all? Why does something appear at all? Even if that something is just an appearance, just an illusion, and it's undivided, why does it appear at all? And the simple answer is just that because you're looking. Because you're looking. You know, when how we've read in science that the most primitive creatures are unicellular, which means that they don't have much senses. They don't have as many senses as us multicellular organisms, right? How they're just blobs, like an amoeba, or think of a blob in water, right? How it's it's just trying to live, and to live it has to eat, and to eat it has to find something to eat, and for it to be able to find something to eat, it has to it has to be able to observe where the food is. It has to get better at finding food, finding nourishment for itself. And really, I don't remember what episode that was, but there's a show by the name of Cosmos. I've only seen the second edition of it, which has Neil deGrasse Tyson as the narrator. And one of my favorite episodes, it's probably the third episode, but I'm not sure, is when organisms evolve eyes for the first time. What that might have been like. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful scene to watch when organisms are just pieces of flesh, you know, just floating through oceans, and they develop bodies to reach food better, which is why they take on that shape of a fish, and then when they get better at maneuvering themselves in the water, they try and they're trying to constantly get better at finding food, right? Because there's a lot of fish in the sea, and it's a Darwinian world out there in the sea, right? It's highly competitive. Big fish eats the small fish. So it's not just finding food for survival, it's just surviving not being eaten as well. So one is just constantly trying to evolve and get better at evading predators and finding food. So this constant want, this constant will, this constant push propels observation, and the evolution that really is rewarded is the evolution of being able to find food by evolving better senses, where you can sense your environment better. And really, how the eyes evolve is that the skin on top of their heads, think of a fish without eyes, and on top of the heads, you can see the sunlight, right? And when the sunlight hits that skin, maybe there was one strain of fishes that had a light layer of skin on their head, and that gave them a unique advantage that when sunlight from above was hitting and there's a fish that passes by over their heads, they would sense that. They would sense the blocking of the sun. And that gave them that small advantage, was advantage enough for them to successfully find food and multiply better. So that whole species of fish just took over the sea. That is how evolution happens. And then probably a variant which had even lighter skin, and then two eyes evolved. That is how eyes have evolved over the years, over millions of years. That is why most creatures have two eyes or an even number of eyes, because of that one ancestor fish who evolved two eyes. But yeah, the point is that we are constantly trying to observe, and we observe because we need to survive. We need to get better at surviving. And that is why something appears. That is why something appears. And this need will always be there to survive and propagate and to eat and to not die. The will to experience is why something appears rather than nothing. And also, the non-dualistic perspective is that truly the truest form of existence is actually nothing. The appearances that you see are only because you are trying to experience, because there's a seer. Consciousness is looking outwards. In Sanskrit, it's called Bahar Mukhi Chetana, which means outwardly faced consciousness. Consciousness is not satisfied with itself. It's trying to look outwards to be satisfied. Satisfaction could be in any form, just looking, or trying to eat, or trying to find a place to escape, or just wanting to know what's out there. Could be any. It's there in many forms, right? Because there is a seer, there is something to be seen. And that is why whenever we see existence, whenever we see that something appears, right? This also falls in line with the double slit experiment that is very popular and you might be aware of. Particles appear when observed. Because there is a seer, there is something. And the second part is, why does something exist rather than nothing? Yeah. Anytime you try to experience something, even if you can doubt that something, you can't doubt your that you're experiencing something, right? You can't doubt consciousness. Anytime you can think or you're observing, consciousness can't be doubted, right? And as long as there is an outward looking consciousness, there will be something. And that something is existence. Only existence is, as they say in non-duality.